The harsh, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound keeping me tethered to reality. The hospital waiting room smelled of stale bleach and burnt filter coffee, a suffocating combination that clawed at the back of my throat. My father was asleep in the room down the hall, his skin the color of old parchment, an IV line snaking into the bruised back of his hand. I was sitting in a cracked vinyl chair, completely drained, when my phone vibrated against the plastic armrest. The screen illuminated the dim, fluorescent-lit corridor. It was a message in the group chat, a sprawling digital thread I had considered my safe haven for the better part of 5 years. I had sent a brief message an hour earlier, apologizing for canceling our long-planned weekend getaway to the coast, citing a sudden family emergency. I expected a wave of digital sympathy, a few heart emojis, promises to reschedule. Instead, there was a single reply from Vivienne, sure. The 2 periods after the word felt heavier than anvils. Before I could process the passive-aggressive sting, a notification bubble popped up. Then another, then a relentless, cascading waterfall of them. My thumbs hovered over the glass as Vivienne launched into a digitized tirade. The words blurred together at first, a jarring contrast to the quiet urgency of the intensive care unit. She typed with a venom I hadn't known she possessed, declaring to the entire group that I always exaggerated things for sympathy. That I was a chronic flake who used tragedy as a convenient exit strategy. She didn't stop there. She dragged up a ghost from our college days, a time I had suffered a severe panic attack before a group presentation, and twisted the narrative until it sounded like a calculated performance for attention. I sat frozen, the cold glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. The real betrayal wasn't just Vivienne's cruelty. It was the silence of the others, broken only by a smattering of those awkward, sweat-drop laughing emojis clinging to her messages like parasites. My stomach didn't just drop, it hollowed out entirely. I began typing a defense, my fingers trembling over the tiny keyboard. I explained about the sirens, the ambulance, the terrifying pallor of my father's face. But the moment I hit send, Vivienne screenshotted my raw, terrified explanation and reposted it with a snarky, mocking caption about my flair for the dramatic. The air in my lungs turned to glass. I stopped typing. I didn't cry. I just methodically took my own screenshots, capturing every jagged insult, every cowardly emoji. Then I muted the chat, slipped the phone into my pocket, and let the silence of the hospital swallow me whole. I thought I was entirely alone in that sterile corridor until a quiet throat cleared near the vending machines. I looked up, my eyes burning. Standing there in a damp trench coat, holding 2 steaming paper cups, was Julian. Julian was the quiet architect of our broader friend group, a man whose dark, observant eyes always seemed to take in more than he ever let on. We had flirted in the margins of parties, shared lingering glances over crowded dinner tables, but the timing had never been right. Until tonight, he walked over, his footsteps muffled by the linoleum, and extended a cup toward me. Black coffee, exactly how I took it. I didn't ask how he knew I was here, I didn't have to. He sat in the cracked vinyl chair beside me, close enough that the damp wool of his coat brushed against my shoulder. The heat radiating from him was a sudden jarring comfort in the freezing room. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell me everything was going to be all right. He just looked at the wall opposite us and spoke in a voice that was low, gravelly, and entirely steady. "I left the chat," Julian said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "About 10 minutes ago. Right after I told Vivienne exactly what I thought of her amateur psychoanalysis. I turned to him, the shock temporarily overriding my exhaustion. You didn't have to do that. Now she's going to turn on you." Julian let out a dry, dismissive scoff. A genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, softening the sharp angles of his jaw. "Let her. I don't make a habit of keeping company with emotional scavengers." He shifted his gaze to me, his dark eyes dropping down to my trembling hands before meeting mine. "How is he?" "Stable," I whispered, my voice finally cracking. "They think it was a minor heart attack, but they're keeping him for observation." Julian nodded slowly. He didn't flinch away from the heavy, suffocating sadness of the room. Instead, he reached out, his large, warm hand covering my freezing fingers wrapped around the paper cup. The touch was electric, a sudden spark of life in a place defined by illness. "You don't have to be the strong one tonight, Elara," he murmured, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Just breathe, I've got you." That night in the hospital was the death of a friendship, but it was the genesis of something entirely different. Over the next 4 months, Julian and I became inseparable. As my father slowly recovered, Julian was the quiet, constant pillar holding up my sky. The romance between us didn't ignite in a flash of dramatic fireworks. It grew like ivy, slow and deep and fiercely resilient. We spent lazy Sunday mornings in his sunlit apartment, the smell of burnt toast and expensive espresso filling the air while jazz crackled from a vintage record player. He learned the exact topography of my anxieties, mapping them out not to exploit them but to soothe them. He taught me the quiet power of boundaries. For years, I had been the peacekeeper, the girl who swallowed her pride to maintain the fragile ecosystem of a toxic friend group. Julian looked at me like I was a masterpiece, not a doormat. One rainy afternoon, while we were tangled in the linen sheets of his bed, the drumming of the rain against the windowpane masking the noise of the city, he traced the line of my collarbone and asked why I had never blocked Vivienne. Because blocking her feels like a reaction, I had whispered, resting my chin on his chest, listening to the steady, reassuring thud of his heartbeat. It feels like admitting she broke something. If I just leave the chat muted, she doesn't exist. Julian had kissed the top of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair. Indifference is a shield, Elara, but eventually you have to put the shield down and pick up a sword. Not to attack, just to draw a line in the sand. I didn't fully understand what he meant until a Tuesday evening in late October. Julian and I were in my kitchen, engaged in a highly competitive attempt to make fresh pasta from scratch. Flour dusted the countertops. The air was thick with the rich, savory scent of garlic and simmering San Marzano tomatoes. And Julian had a smudge of flour on the tip of his nose that I found devastatingly charming. I was laughing at his aggressive kneading technique when my phone, resting on the kitchen island, vibrated. The screen lit up. A direct message on Instagram. The name at the top of the screen made the breath hitch in my throat. Vivienne. Julian paused, sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmospheric pressure. He wiped his flour-coated hands on a dish towel and stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "What is it?" he asked softly. I tapped the notification, opening the message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a tentative olive branch or a question about my father's health. It was a paragraph dripping with an artificial, sugary sweetness that made my teeth ache just reading it. "Hey babe, long time no see, hope you've been doing amazing. Listen, I'm actually applying for that senior account manager position at the tech firm downtown. And I listed you as a character reference since we worked so flawlessly together on that marketing project last year. They just need someone to shoot them a quick email confirming I'm reliable, a team player and honest. Let me know if you need their contact info. Miss you, Zox." I stared at the word. Honest. It sat there on the glowing screen, a monumental monument to her delusion. For months, we had barely spoken. She had never offered a single word of remorse for the night she publicly humiliated me while my father was strapped to a cardiac monitor. And now she wanted me to vouch for her integrity. A cold, familiar knot tightened in my stomach. The old Elara, the one who hated conflict, the one who would rather set herself on fire to keep others warm, wanted to just delete the message and pretend I never saw it. I wanted to retreat into the warm, garlic-scented safety of my kitchen and ignore the phantom sting of her words. "The audacity is almost cinematic," Julian murmured against my neck, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. He didn't tell me what to do. He just pressed a warm kiss to my temple, a silent reminder that I was safe, that I was loved, and that I didn't owe this ghost anything. I pulled away gently, grabbing a paper towel to wipe the flour from my hands. I picked up the phone. The glass felt heavy. I read the message again, the sheer, unadulterated entitlement of it washing over me. Julian leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, watching me with a gaze full of quiet pride. He knew I was stepping up to the line in the sand. I didn't type out an angry paragraph. I didn't match her sugary tone. I kept my breathing even, channeling the calm, steady rhythm of Julian's heartbeat from all those nights we spent intertwined. I drafted a reply that was cool, professional, and brutally polite. "Hi Vivienne. I received your message. Unfortunately, I am not comfortable acting as a character reference or vouching for your integrity, given that you publicly questioned mine a few months ago and never took accountability for it. I suggest you find someone else to contact the firm. Good luck." I hit send. I set the phone down on the marble counter. Julian smiled, a slow, devastating smirk, and handed me a glass of red wine. "To drawing lines," he toasted softly. We barely had time to clink our glasses before the phone buzzed violently. She was typing. The notification popped up almost instantly. The mask of the sweet, nostalgic friend had slipped entirely, replaced by the defensive, venomous girl from the group chat. "Wow, you are being unbelievably dramatic. It was literally just chat drama from months ago. People get over things, Elara. You shouldn't hold grudges over such small things. Grow up. Small things, a father in the hospital, a panic attack weaponized for cheap laughs. A public assassination of my character while I was completely vulnerable. I didn't feel the stomach drop this time. I didn't feel the panic. I felt a profound, icy clarity. I opened my photo gallery and scrolled back to that night in the hospital. I found the screenshots I had taken while sitting in that cracked vinyl chair, breathing in the smell of bleach. I selected two specific images. The first was her calling me a manipulative flake who faked emergencies for attention. The second was her screenshotting my desperate explanation about my father, accompanied by a caption calling me a pathetic liar. I attached the two images to the chat. I didn't add a single word of text. I didn't offer an insult, a defense, or an explanation. I just hit send, delivering her own poison back to her doorstep. Then I turned off my phone, slid it into the kitchen drawer, and pushed the drawer shut with a satisfying click. Julian was watching me, his eyes dark and intense. He closed the distance between us, taking the wine glass from my hand and setting it on the counter. He cupped my face in his warm, slightly flour-dusted hands, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones. "How does it feel?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Quiet," I breathed, looking up into his eyes. "Controlled." "Fair." He leaned in, capturing my lips in a kiss that tasted like red wine and absolute salvation. It was a kiss that grounded me in the present, washing away the lingering ghosts of toxic friendships and old anxieties. For the first time in my life, I wasn't exhausted from playing the bigger person. I was just myself, standing in my own kitchen, fiercely protected and deeply loved. When I finally opened the drawer the next morning, the message status under the screenshot simply read, "Seen asterisk." She had left me on read. There was no rebuttal, no snarky comeback. Just the deafening silence of someone who had finally been handed a mirror and couldn't bear the reflection. Maybe some would call it petty. Maybe it wasn't the high road of absolute forgiveness that self-help books preach. But sometimes the high road is just a scenic route for people who want to keep walking all over you. Choosing yourself isn't dramatic, it's necessary. If you've ever found yourself twisting into knots to accommodate someone who wouldn't even offer you a blanket if you were freezing, let this be your sign to stop. You do not owe your peace, your references, or your friendship to people who only value you when it's convenient for them. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to sever a toxic tie to protect your own peace, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about finding love, setting boundaries, and claiming your worth.